What would you do if you were unfairly singled out in a crowd, with no one knowing who you really were? What if a simple security check at LAX turned into a fight for justice? When a TSA officer's harsh treatment crosses the line, one woman decides it's time to stand up. But what happens when she's met with resistance, and the person in charge doesn't even know who she really is? Stay tuned to find out, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of unexpected courage. The hum of constant motion echoed through the bustling halls of Los Angeles International Airport LAX, the second busiest airport in the world. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of tension and excitement, the usual soundtrack of hurried footsteps, boarding announcements, and the occasional distant clink of a luggage trolley. It was a day like any other, yet something felt different. The airport, known for its organized chaos, was experiencing an unusually overwhelming day. Flight delays, packed security lines, and system malfunctions were causing frustrations to spill over into every corner. Among the throngs of travelers, Natalie Carter moved with a sense of purpose, her stride confident and steady. At first glance, she was just another professional woman in her early 30s, dressed in a sharp navy blazer and tailored slacks. But there was an air of quiet authority about her. As the newly appointed head of airport relations, she had a mountain of responsibilities to juggle. Her sleek rolling suitcase clicked against the polished floors as she walked, mentally ticking off her list of tasks for the day. Meeting with an international airline partner in Terminal 4, ensuring smooth transitions for passenger flow amidst the chaos, reviewing a list of customer service complaints that had piled up during the past few days. The pressures of the role were real, but Natalie had built a career on managing complex situations with grace and precision. Today, however, the usual rush felt different. A power glitch had caused delays at security checkpoints, and tempers were starting to flare. The tension in the air was palpable, but Natalie was unfazed. She had faced greater challenges before. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to unfold, a moment that would test her leadership in ways she hadn't anticipated. Natalie Carter had come a long way to reach her position as the head of airport relations at Los Angeles International Airport. Growing up in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Los Angeles, Natalie was no stranger to adversity. Her parents, both hard-working schoolteachers, had instilled in her a deep respect for education and perseverance. She was raised with the belief that challenges were merely opportunities in disguise, and she carried that mindset through every phase of her life. Her academic excellence earned her a scholarship to one of the country's most prestigious universities, where she pursued a degree in public relations and business. It wasn't an easy journey. Along the way, she encountered both overt and subtle forms of discrimination, particularly as a black woman trying to rise through the ranks in industries dominated by people who didn't look like her. However, Natalie used those moments of bias to fuel her ambition. Instead of allowing these experiences to discourage her, she transformed them into stepping stones, proving her worth time and again. Her rise within the airport was marked by a series of strategic roles across multiple departments, from customer service and logistics to media relations. Each position added to her vast understanding of airport operations, but it was her exceptional ability to manage crises and handle customer complaints with tact and efficiency that eventually caught the eye of the airport executives. When the position of head of airport relations opened, Natalie's name quickly surfaced at the top of the list. She had the experience, the empathy, and the drive to succeed. As Natalie walked through the security checkpoint on her way to Terminal 4, she reflected briefly on her journey. She had worked hard to earn her place here, but as she entered the busy security area, she was reminded that her role wasn't just about navigating logistics. It was about ensuring every passenger received the same level of respect and attention, regardless of their background. Suddenly, her gaze fell on a couple in the midst of a security screening. The Johnsons, she noticed immediately, were standing apart from the rest of the passengers. The wife, a petite woman in her late 40s, clutched her purse tightly to her chest, her knuckles white with anxiety. Her husband, tall and broad-shouldered, stood by her side, trying to calm her down, but his expression was tense. The TSA officer leading the check seemed unusually harsh, barking orders in a way that made the entire scene feel uncomfortable. The officer, a tall man with sharp features and a rigid posture, was standing over the Johnsons, instructing them to remove their belongings from their bags. His voice was loud and stern, drawing the attention of nearby passengers. Natalie took a moment to observe. The wife's nervousness was evident, her eyes darted around, and her fingers trembled as she followed the officer's commands. The husband, on the other hand, seemed visibly agitated but did his best to keep his composure. It wasn't hard to notice that something wasn't right. While random checks were part of airport protocol, they were supposed to be conducted with professionalism and respect. This officer, however, seemed to be taking his authority a little too far, making the situation feel more like an interrogation than a routine screening. Natalie's intuition told her that the couple was being singled out for reasons beyond the usual protocol. She had seen this kind of behavior before, when officers allowed their biases to influence their actions. Without hesitation, she stepped closer, intending to intervene. Her gaze remained focused on the scene, analyzing how the situation was unfolding. Just as she was about to approach, her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Simone, her assistant manager. Minor issue with new TSA officer Daniel Brooks. "Can you swing by the checkpoint?" Natalie sighed, quickly reading the message. This wasn't just another glitch in the system. This was a direct call for her to step in. She could already feel the familiar stir of leadership instincts rising. Her style had always been one of direct action, taking charge when things went awry. It was what had earned her respect and trust within the airport. If someone was stepping out of line, especially when it came to treating passengers with fairness, she wouldn't hesitate to address it head-on. Glancing back at the couple, who were still under unnecessary scrutiny, Natalie made her decision. With a firm but composed step, she turned toward the TSA checkpoint, her mind already formulating a plan to resolve the issue. There was no turning back now. Natalie's heels clicked sharply as she moved toward the checkpoint, her focus narrowing. The anxiety that had initially surged within her had now been replaced by cold resolve. This wasn't just about a small conflict. This was about justice, fairness, and her role in upholding both. Not only for the Johnsons, but for every passenger who had ever felt unfairly judged by an authority figure. As she approached, she saw TSA officer Daniel Brooks towering over the Johnsons, who were already visibly distressed. The wife was clutching her purse tightly to her chest, her eyes darting nervously around, while the husband tried to maintain calm, his jaw clenched in frustration. Daniel was unnecessarily harsh in his demands, barking orders and treating the couple like criminals instead of simply guiding them through the routine procedure. Natalie stepped forward, clearing her throat just loudly enough to catch Daniel's attention. He glanced at her briefly, then turned back to the couple, dismissing her presence as irrelevant. She stood her ground, refusing to be brushed aside. "Excuse me, Officer Brooks," she said, her voice steady but firm. "Can I help with this situation?" Daniel didn't respond immediately. He barely even acknowledged her, continuing to engage with the couple as if she weren't there. Finally, after a tense pause, he shot her a glance. "No need," he replied dismissively, his voice flat. "We're handling it." Natalie's irritation flared, but she kept her composure. She had worked tirelessly to earn her position, and no one, especially not this officer, was going to make her feel invisible or unimportant. She took a step forward, her presence undeniable. "I'm Natalie Carter, head of airport relations," she stated, each word measured. "If there's an issue, I'll take it from here." Daniel's eyes flicked to her briefly, his expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his gaze, surprise, maybe even disbelief. He quickly regained his composure, sneering. "Head of what? Airport relations?" Daniel scoffed, clearly mocking her role. "I don't care what your title is. I'm doing my job, and I don't need anyone stepping in." Natalie's pulse quickened as she held his gaze. His dismissiveness felt like a direct challenge, but she wasn't going to let it shake her. She had dealt with this kind of behavior before, people who underestimated her based on her gender or race, people who didn't take her seriously just because they couldn't see the power behind her position. But she wasn't about to back down, not today. "I'm not here to undermine your authority," she said calmly, her voice unwavering. "But I'm here to ensure passengers are treated fairly and with respect. This is not just about procedures, it's about how we treat people. Now, either we resolve this respectfully or I'll take further action." Daniel's posture stiffened as he crossed his arms, an arrogant sneer spreading across his face. "You think you can just override me?" he spat. "I'm TSA. I'm the one who calls the shots here." Around them, the crowd had grown, the atmosphere growing heavier as whispers rippled through the passengers. The tension was thick, and the scene was quickly escalating into something far more than a routine checkpoint issue. Daniel seemed oblivious to the damage he was causing. "You may be TSA," Natalie responded, her tone resolute, "but that doesn't give you the right to treat people like this. If she requires additional screening, we'll do it properly, without intimidation. This is not how we treat passengers at LAX." For a brief moment, Daniel's eyes faltered, a flicker of doubt passing over his face, but it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a deepening scowl. "Well, I'm not going to let you tell me how to do my job," he retorted, his voice now low and threatening. "You think your little title means you can tell me to step aside? I've been doing this for years." "You don't scare me." The heat of his words struck her like a blow, but Natalie didn't flinch. She thought back to her childhood on the south side of Chicago, to the countless times she had been overlooked, dismissed, or undervalued. Her parents had taught her to fight back, to never let anyone strip away her sense of dignity, no matter how big or small the challenge seemed. "I've seen people like you before," she said, her voice unwavering. "People who think their badge gives them the right to push others around, but I'm not backing down. Step aside or I'll handle this." The tension in the air thickened, almost palpable as the crowd watched. Daniel, for the first time, remained silent, his jaw clenched in frustration. His failure to respond was more revealing than any words could have been. The moment had shifted. Natalie was no longer just confronting him as an airport employee. She was challenging him, holding him accountable for his actions. She stood her ground, knowing that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. The tension from the confrontation still lingered in the air as Natalie returned to her office, her mind racing with the events that had just unfolded. She had never imagined that her first real test in her new position would involve an arrogant TSA officer pushing the limits of authority so openly. But she knew it wasn't over yet. Daniel Brooks wasn't the type to back down, and his earlier threats still echoed in her mind. Just as she settled into her desk and began reviewing the notes from the meeting she had missed, her phone buzzed. It was an email from an unknown address, the subject line reading, "A word to the wise." Frowning, Natalie clicked it open. The message was brief, but its contents made her freeze. "I saw what happened with Langley. You might want to watch your back. He's the type who doesn't let things go. Also, check out the security footage from Gate 42 earlier today. Something else you need to see. Natalie's heart skipped a beat. The name Langley was a mistake. The sender was referring to Daniel Brooks, but the message was clear. Someone was watching him, and they knew more than they should. The ominous tone sent a chill down her spine. She had no idea who this anonymous tipster was, but their warning felt all too real. She clicked the security footage link that followed the message, her fingers trembling slightly. The footage was time-stamped for around 1037 a.m. The grainy video from Gate 42 showed a scene that made Natalie's stomach churn. Daniel was standing at the front of a line of passengers, his broad frame looming over a group of Asian American travelers. The couple at the front of the group appeared uncomfortable, shifting uncomfortably as Daniel barked orders at them, his tone harsh. The woman clutched her child tightly to her chest, her face filled with fear as Daniel continued his aggressive questioning. Natalie watched in growing horror as the footage played. It wasn't just the usual sternness of airport security. It was cruelty, intimidation, and disregard for protocol. Daniel's body language was a clear indicator of his bias, pushing the passengers into an unnecessary confrontation. The video ended with the group hastily being escorted off to a secondary screening area, but not before Daniel slammed his hand against the security desk in frustration, further escalating the situation. Natalie's heart raced. This wasn't an isolated incident. She quickly accessed more footage from other gates, reviewing every moment she could find of Daniel interacting with passengers. The pattern became painfully clear. He wasn't just enforcing security procedures. He was using his position to intimidate people, particularly those from marginalized backgrounds. She scrolled through report after report, all pointing to the same behavior: unwarranted aggression, harassment, and a complete lack of empathy. A common thread ran through each of them. Daniel seemed to single out people who were already vulnerable, using his authority to make them feel powerless. A knot tightened in her stomach as the weight of this discovery hit her hard. Natalie felt her resolve harden. She couldn't let this slide. This wasn't just about her job. It was about standing up for what was right, even when it meant going up against someone with far more experience and authority. But the threat from the anonymous tipster lingered in her mind. Daniel was growing more unpredictable, and if she didn't act quickly, things could escalate even further. She took a deep breath, knowing what she had to do next. The stakes were higher than ever, and she couldn't afford to wait. She needed to confront Daniel, but this time, it wouldn't be just about one incident. It would be about bringing him to account for his entire pattern of behavior. Natalie wasted no time. The evidence she had uncovered was too damning to ignore, and the threat from Daniel Brooks only made it clearer that this battle was far from over. She headed straight for Ethan Brooks' office, the head of security operations, hoping he would finally take action. Ethan was a seasoned professional, former military, and one of the few people at the airport whose judgment Natalie trusted implicitly. As she walked in, she found him sitting behind his desk, eyes already narrowing when he saw the urgency in her expression. "I need to talk to you about Daniel Brooks," Natalie said, closing the door behind her. She wasted no time recounting the details, the footage, the reports, the harassment. Ethan listened intently, his brow furrowing as the severity of the situation became clear. He had known about Daniel's aggressive behavior but hadn't acted on it. "There have been whispers," Ethan said, finally breaking his silence, "but we've never had solid evidence. This is different." Natalie nodded, her voice calm but firm. "We can't let it slide any longer. We need to launch an internal investigation. This man is a threat to the safety and integrity of the airport." Ethan's gaze hardened. "You're right. We'll start gathering statements immediately. I'll back you up all the way. If we don't act now, it could get worse." With Ethan on her side, Natalie felt a surge of confidence. Together, they began strategizing how to handle the situation. A small team was assembled to gather testimonies from passengers and staff, and they began preparing for a formal meeting with the airport's disciplinary board. As the day wore on, Natalie's resolve only grew stronger. She couldn't afford to back down. But just as things seemed to be moving in the right direction, her phone rang. "Miss Carter," the voice on the other end was familiar but laced with venom. It was Daniel. "You've made a big mistake, you know that?" Natalie's stomach clenched. Daniel's voice dripped with disdain. "You think you can challenge me, push me around like some office worker? You'll regret this. I've been in this job far longer than you, and I know how things work. You won't get away with this. I'll make sure of it." The threat was clear. Daniel wasn't just making a power play, he was warning her, trying to intimidate her into submission. But Natalie wasn't intimidated. She took a deep breath and set her phone down, her eyes steely with determination. The stakes had just escalated. She was no longer just defending herself against a rogue officer. This was about standing up for the integrity of the entire airport. With the growing pile of evidence, Natalie knew she had no choice but to take it to the airport board. There was no turning back. The next step was clear. She would confront Daniel head-on and make sure the airport took action before things spiraled further out of control. The emergency hearing was scheduled swiftly, and the airport board convened in a small, high-stakes conference room. The room buzzed with quiet anticipation as board members took their seats, the weight of the situation pressing down on everyone involved. Natalie stood at the front, prepared to present the case she had meticulously built. She began by walking the board through the timeline of events, from the initial reports of Daniel Brooks' misconduct to the video evidence she had uncovered. The footage, along with testimonies from multiple passengers, painted a clear picture of repeated intimidation and harassment. Each passenger's account revealed a disturbing pattern of bias and aggression from Daniel, particularly toward marginalized groups. Natalie made her case calmly, but with unwavering conviction, detailing how Daniel's behavior went against the very values the airport stood for. Daniel's attempts to defend himself fell flat. He stammered through a few arguments, but the evidence spoke for itself. The board members exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and concern. They understood the gravity of the situation. Finally, the board made their decision. In a unanimous vote, they agreed to dismiss Daniel from his position. The decision was clear. The airport would no longer tolerate such behavior, and they would uphold their commitment to creating a respectful environment for both passengers and staff. As the hearing concluded, Natalie felt a wave of relief wash over her, mixed with a deep exhaustion. The battle had been hard-fought, but she had emerged victorious. She had exposed a toxic culture of intimidation and put an end to it. Daniel was escorted out by security, his face flushed with anger, but Natalie stood tall, knowing that the airport had been made safer, not just for today, but for the future. As Natalie stood outside the hearing room, the weight of the day began to sink in. She had not only confronted an individual who had abused his power, but she had also taken a stand for a broader cause, creating a space where fairness and respect were at the forefront. Her journey, shaped by years of personal and professional growth, had led her to this moment. She had been taught to fight for what was right, to stand tall against injustice, and to never back down from a challenge. Today, those lessons had defined her success. The atmosphere at LAX began to shift. Employees and passengers alike felt the change. There was a newfound sense of accountability in the air. Natalie implemented new training programs aimed at reducing bias and fostering mutual respect among staff. She worked tirelessly to ensure that the airport environment was not only efficient but also inclusive, where every person, regardless of background, felt safe and respected. Natalie's victory over Daniel Brooks was more than just a personal triumph. It was a reminder to everyone that true leadership is about integrity. It's about standing up for what's right, holding others accountable, and ensuring that respect and fairness are upheld, no matter the cost.